Okay, so it's the 25th of December and I decided I'm going to make a Gingerbread Man tutorial in Blender 2.91. So this is looking a little bit intimidating to you guys. Say for example you're a little bit new to Blender. Don't worry, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, the modeling is really basic, and even the particle systems here for the hair, I mean, just a few minor settings we're going to be tweaking there. So don't let this intimidate you. Pretty beginner friendly, I reckon. And I'm also making this model available on my Patreon. For those of you who are on Patreon, also really I do appreciate all that support. So let's get into it. This cute little gingerbread man, or even a gingerbread woman if you want to make it. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so go ahead, open up a new scene in Blender. I'm using Blender 2.91 at the making of this tutorial. If you're in a later version, that's fine. So let's get started by going to a front orthographic view. I've just deleted all the default objects, as you can see here. We're going to go Shift A, and we're going to go to our mesh option here. And let's add in a circle. So click on circle here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go here to the add circle settings, and we're going to make sure that the vertex count here, or the vertices if you will, is just 12. So we're going to go with a count of 12, hit enter, and it's dropped down here, and now we have a circle with 12 vertices you can see all around here. So we're going to, with this guy active in our selection up here, we're going to hit tab, the tab key. That's going to go into edit mode for us here. You can also manually go into edit mode, and with this geometry selected, all of these guys here, we're going to hit R to rotate, and then we're going to hit X and then 9 and 0. So R, X, 9, 0, and then hit enter. So we've rotated that 90 degrees on the X axis. So once we've done that, we need to fill this geometry. So we're going to hit Control F with all of these vertices selected, or Command F, and we're going to go down to the grid fill option here. Now before you click anything, go down to this caddy here, open it up, and just bring down the spin to 2, and it should look like this. If the rotation is the wrong way around, just play around with the offset till it looks just like this. So one line edge going down the middle here, and then these 3 edges across, connecting everything with these 8 different faces. So go to your front orthographic view again, deselect everything by hitting A twice. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make the body. It's going to be super simple. We're going to select these 3 vertices at the bottom. And then we're going to go E to extrude, and we're going to hit Z, so it goes down onto Z. We're going to go to about here. Then we're going to go S, Z, and flatten those vertices. So S, Z, scale them down to Z. Just neatening things up a bit. And then we're going to go S to scale it up a bit. And then we're going to go E to extrude, and Z, and extrude down onto Z, or Z, whatever you want to call it, to about here, and then E again, down onto Z, and then we're going to go E again onto Z, like that. So just these extrusions like this. Select this vertex on the right corner down here, and we're going to hit G in our front view and just move it up to about here. Now, we don't want to have to model on both sides. So to save time, we're going to select all of these vertices on our left side, and we're going to hit X and just delete those vertices. Just go over to your modifiers, and let's give this one a mirror modifier. Now if you don't want it to come apart, you just need to make sure to enable clipping. So now if you enable clipping, you can see it's all fused together properly. Okay, so now we can go on with the rest of this tutorial. So let's come in here, go to our edge select, and select this edge down here, and then have E to extrude it. Okay, so maybe we need to add in a cut first. So go in Control R over here, Control R, hovering your cursor over here, and then double click, and then double G just to slide that edge in there. So now select the edge down here in your front view and go E to extrude. We're going to extrude it down to about here. And if that edge is still active, we're going to rotate it in our front orthographic view just to flatten things out. Bring it in a little bit. Now this is where you have to kind of decide what you want it to look like. You can do any kind of pose you want. You can have the legs more apart, more in. It really depends on what you're going for. Maybe have some sort of stencil in your kitchen that you could use as a reference. So I'm also going to just select this face over here, this edge, sorry, and I'm going to go E to extrude it to about here, and I'm going to rotate it just to straighten it out like that. And then I'm going to select this edge here and just S to shrink it a little bit, and then G to bring it up, because the arm is kind of starting just where the bottom of the head is. And this is something that you see a lot with gingerbread men. They don't really have much of a neck. So we're going to select this armpit vertex and just bring it here a bit, and then thicken out the arms. Going to give the body a bit more of a hip here by pulling these two vertices out here. And you can see this is already starting to look really cool. So I'm going to come over here, Control R, hovering over this arm area, and you should see a yellow line appearing. That's an edge. Double click to add that in, and then Control R over here. So just hover over this edge, hit Control R, you'll see a yellow line, double click, and we've added an extra edge there. We're also going to come in here, hovering over the edge with our cursor, Control R, you're going to see a yellow line, roll your middle mouse button 3 times, or 2 times to add in 3 cuts, double click, and do the same thing on the leg. So just hover the cursor over the edge here, Control R, should see a yellow line, roll your mouse twice, double click. Okay, so now this is going to be extruded. So hit A to select everything. Then we're going to go E to extrude. We're going to extrude it out to about here. Now you can make it as thick as you want, but be realistic. Like this is too thick. Also this is too thin. So just go with something like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give this guy a subdivision surface modifier. And that's going to look a lot better. In fact, let's bump the viewport level up to 2 here. And we'll leave the render at 2. You can bump the render up to 3 if you want. Then we're going to go out into object mode again. And then we're going to go object and enable shade smooth. And here we can see this is what it's looking like. So let's go back into edit mode, hitting tab. Hit A to select everything. And then we're going to go G, Z, and just bring it up till it's sitting on the floor. In fact, go to your front orthographic view. Just move it up till it's sitting on that red axis line there, so you know it's on the floor. And your origin point, that little orange dot, should be in the middle at the bottom as well. So now we're going to just do some refining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Z to go into wireframe, deselect everything, enable proportional editing, and then I'm going to select these bottom vertices here. And then I'm going to go S, X, and scale them out in the X just a little bit like that. Just to add some dynamic to the bottom here to kind of give it some, like a feel of a foot or something, so it's not just exactly perfectly the same length everywhere. And I'm going to do the same thing here as well in the end by just selecting these guys over here in the end. I'm going to hit S just to scale them up a bit. And I'm rolling my middle mouse button with the proportional editing to control the fall off amount. Okay, so don't go too crazy. So just something like that. And this is, once again, one of those things where it's not just a matter of following my tutorial 100%. You can kind of make it your own by using your own creative input and randomizing things, adding in different structures and flows to your geometry. And maybe you want to make it look more feminine, more skinny, more fat, more big, whatever. I don't know. Just it's completely up to you to make it your own. But this is kind of a gingerbread design that I like. So now when we're done with that, we're also just going to come over here on one of these edges, hovering the cursor over it. Control R, you should see an edge appear, double click. And then if you go Alt S and you expand it out in normal. So Alt S and just expand it out in the normals a little bit. Just to give it some roundness like that. Okay, so that's looking really, really cool. So we're going to hit Shift A. We're going to go to our mesh options and add in a UV sphere. This is a little bit too high poly here, so we're going to go to our add UV sphere settings down here. So just open up this caddy and we're going to go to the segments and make it 16 as a top. And then we're going to make the ring segments 8 like that. Just drop this down again and now grab this UV sphere in your front orthographic view, hit G, move it to your head here and then hit S to scale it down to whatever size you want, and then just click. Go to your right orthographic view by hitting 3 and then we're going to go G, Y and move it forward. Tab into edit mode, and with all of this geometry selected, we're going to go R90 in the right orthographic view just till so the rotation is changed. Select this back vertex, go Control plus to grow the selection to here and hit X and delete vertices. Then we're just going to go Shift Alt, click on this edge here to select it. And then we're going to go E to extrude, S to scale, bring it in like that, and then G, Y, move that back, just like that. So we're just creating half a sphere. You can leave it a whole sphere if you wish, but then I'm going to go give this guy a subdivision surface modifier, tab out of edit mode, go to object mode and enable shade smooth. So this looks like a drop. And then we're going to go add modifier. We're going to give this guy a mirror. Click on the eyedropper and we're going to reference the gingerbread man, so click on that. So now it's mirrored on the other side perfectly. So this is going to be like the little gum drop buttons or whatever you want to call them, but in this case it's going to be the eyes. So we're going to just move it around and scale it. This is once again a very personal preference thing. You might want bigger eyes if you're going for something a little bit more alien, a little bit more whatever. If you want it to be a little bit more human, you might make the eyes anatomically just correct as far as the distance goes. But this is really just up to you. You can make it look all goofy by putting them apart, cute, whatever. So just figure it out. I'm just experimenting here. So I'm going to go roughly here with about that size. Works for me. So let's go on to the mouth. Let's do that with, so let's go Shift A, and let's do that with a torus. So add in a torus. With this torus selected, we're going to go RX90 and hit enter. Tab into edit mode, and in wireframe, just select all of these top vertices, hit X and delete vertices. Then just select this edge of vertices here. So Shift Alt, just click here to loop select them. Hit F to fill, and do the exact same thing on the other side. Just select that loop of vertices, F to fill, then tab out of edit mode. Then you're going to go G, Z, move it up to the face, S to scale it down. Once again, this is personal preference. So G, Y, move it forward, and place it here under the eyes. So I'm going to place mine down a little bit to here. Then I'm going to go and give this a subdivision surface modifier, go to object mode, and enable shade smooth. So this looks just a little bit too perfect. So what we're going to do is tab into edit mode. With proportional editing still enabled, I'm going to select a vertex here in the corner, hit G, and I'm just going to move it down a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing this side. And then I'm going to select edges here and scale them in just a little bit. Same over here, just to make it look kind of not perfectly symmetrical on both sides, and also not a perfect cylinder. We want to make it look like this was extruded out of some sort of nozzle. So give it a little bit of roughness, a little bit of random variation. Something like that looks a lot more realistic than just a perfect semi torus. Might move it into the mesh just a little bit more here. Okay, so that's the mouth done, and also this is going to look a lot better obviously once we have made the material. So let's continue with the details. Select the eye here, go Shift D to duplicate and bring it down, and then over here in the modifiers just get rid of the mirror, and then place it in the middle here, roughly here, and here S to scale it down a bit, and then Shift D, Z, bring it down. So these are just going to be 2 buttons. You can make 3 buttons if you want. I think 2 buttons just works better for my personal preference. So just grab them and bring them in a bit. So these are the 2 little buttons here. And now we're going to make a little bow tie for him, which is really going to make him look cute. So we're going to go Shift A, add in a plane, tab into edit mode, RX90 to rotate those guys, GX, move it over to the side, and give it a mirror modifier. Enable clipping, so when you go GX and you move them back together, they'll kind of fuse. So you can see there. And then we're going to go S just to scale that down to about here, and we're going to come in here, Control R to add in a loop, double click, double G to slide it down, and then S to scale it like this. And then I'm going to select these 2 vertices here, scale them up a bit, just like that. Okay, nothing too fancy. And then we're going to go Control R, add in and cut over here. And I'm going to select this vertex here, and in the end we're going to go GX and move it out a bit. So this is just a matter of, so just move it forward a bit if it helps. This is just a matter of scaling these points out, these vertices, till you get the kind of bow you're looking for. So I'm going to go something like that. Then I'm going to hit A to select everything, and I'm going to go E to extrude it forward. And then I'm going to go Control R over here, double click, and add in this edge here. I'm going to go Alt S and just expand it out along the normals like that. Then I'm going to give this a subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to come in here, Control R, double click, double G to slide in an edge to tighten that up. And I'm going to do the same thing again, Control R, double click, double G, and I'm going to slide one up this way. Then I'm going to select these vertices here. So just select them, and then S to scale them up a bit. Grab this vertex at the front and go G, Y, and move it forward. Then once you're happy, you can tab out of edit mode, go to object mode and enable shade smooth. Bump up the subdivision level in the viewport as well. And then we're going to go G, Z, bring it up to the neck here, and then S to scale that down like that. Then we're going to go G, Y, and we're going to move it back into the neck. Now I like to leave it a little bit larger than too small, so something like that is perfect. Might just come in edit mode here and just add in one more edge loop here. Double click and just S, Z, and scale it up on the Z. So So just like that, just makes it look a little bit more like a bow tie. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. Maybe grab this one, just slide it in a bit more. So you can fiddle as much as you want with this. It's really never 100% perfect. You can always work on it a bit more. But that is a really nice fonding kind of bow tie. So let's think about what we can do next. So we've already got the eyes done, the mouth, we've got the bow tie here, and these two buttons. Might scale them up just a bit. I think what we're going to do next is make the hat itself, which really is just a really nice little feature to this gingerbread man. We're going to go Shift A, we're going to add in a circle. Go to the add circle settings and make sure the vertex count here is 12, and then hit enter. Drop down, and now we've got this circle here with 12 vertices. We're going to go G, Z, move it up to the head here, and then we're going to go to our top orthographic view by hitting 7, G, Y, and move it forward till it's in the middle, and then we're going to go S, Y, and scale it down on the Y, about this much. Tab into edit mode, then select this vertex, holding and shift select this vertex, so just these two here. And with proportional editing enabled, we're going to go S, Y, and just scale that down on the Y a little bit more, just to flatten it. So just making it roughly the shape of the top of the head. And then we're going to disable proportional editing. We're going to hit A to select everything, then E to extrude, and then Z, and we're going to extrude it down to about here, just above the eyes. And then we're going to go E to extrude, S to scale, and scale it in. Then we're going to deselect that, select this top edge here, so Shift Alt, click on the edge here, loop select that, then go E to extrude, and then S to scale. And go into about here, just like that. And then we're going to come in here, Control R, roll your button once, double click, and then S, Z to scale up on the Z, and then Alt S just to expand it out a bit to along the normal, so scale it out along the normals with Alt S. And now we're going to give this a subdivision surface modifier. It looks too perfect still, so what we need to do is go into wireframe, enable proportional editing again, and then just select these vertices here, hit G, and just move it up. You can roll your middle mouse button to control the fall off. So just make it kind of look curved to the head and not symmetrical on both sides. Okay? So you can spend as much time as you want on this. I'm going to keep mine really basic here, just like this. This is going to make it look a lot better on the head. So in object mode, we're just going to give that shade smooth, and then we can go back to edit mode. So now we need to make the thing that hangs over the top. We could use a cloth simulation and make like just a cone and then run a cloth simulation, but I'm just going to model it in this case. So I'm going to disable proportional editing, then select this edge here, Shift Alt, so click on this edge, and Shift D to duplicate it, and then S to scale it a little bit. Go to your front orthographic view again, and then we're going to go E to extrude. We're going to extrude it up like this, and then we're going to go E to extrude, and S to scale a little bit, and then R to rotate it, and then G to move it to the side. And then we're going to go E to extrude again, R to rotate, S to scale it a bit, and we're just working our way around like this. So you can see what I'm doing here. And E to extrude again, R to rotate, and then S to scale. And what we're trying to do is just work our way around till we have it hanging. So E to extrude, R to rotate, S to scale, and then I'm going to scale it up just a bit, and then I'm going to go E to extrude it down one more time like that, and then S to scale. So you can see that's what it looks like, but it's a little bit too flat. So in our top orthographic view, with that edge still selected, we're going to go Control plus to grow the selection a few times like this. In our top orthographic view, we're going to hit S and then Y and just scale that out in the Y a bit. And we can also just select this edge here, and then S, Y, and scale that out along the Y. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just something like that should be fine. And then while we're still in edit mode here, we're going to go Shift A, add in a UV sphere, go to the add sphere settings, and just leave the top as 16 and the ring segments as 8. Then we're going to go G to move it up, and we're going to put this pom-pom on the end of the hat here, and we're going to leave it at about that scale. Go to your right view, move it forward a bit, so just place it right there. In fact, you could select these vertices here and the ball itself, the pom-pom on the end, enable proportional editing, then come to the drop down here and make connected only. Then if you go into your top view and you go G, and you roll your middle mouse button up a little bit, you can just move it back so it's just hanging just behind the shoulder there like that. Okay, so spend as much time as you want refining this. I might grab this vertex here in the front view and just bring it out a little bit more. Control R to add another loop here if the geometry is needed. So just spend as much time as you want. Okay, I might grab this here. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing, just refining the hat. So pretty easy to make. So once you're happy with that, tab out of edit mode, go to object mode and enable shade smooth. And I'm going to go to the subdivision surface modifier and bump the levels up to 2 in the viewport as well. So now we have the hat done. Now we're going to add our particle systems to the hat here. First of all, let's just, before we get into particles, select everything here in our scene. So all of the little items that make up our gingerbread man. Then go Control A or Command A and apply the scale, just to make sure the scale is correct. That's really important when you work with particle systems. So let's select the hat here. And before we go too far with the particle systems, we actually need to create some groups to let the particle system know where we want it to be distributed. Because we're going to have 2 different lengths of hair on the hat. And also I'm just noticing here that there's a bit of a gap here, so I'm just going to quickly go into the edit mode again and just select the bottom edge of the hat and just hit E to extrude it, and I'm extruding it down into the hat there just to close that gap. Okay, so not too big of a deal. So once I'm done with that and we're in edit mode, we're going to go over here to our object data properties, and you're going to see something here called Vertex Groups. So what we need to do is select a vertex on the bottom part of a hat here, holding in shift select a vertex on the pom-pom on the end here, and then if you hit Control L, it'll select only these 2 meshes. Okay, so anything connected, those vertices are connected to. And with them active, we're going to now hit the plus here, and we're going to go assign. So now these are assigned to that group, and we're going to double click on this group, and we're going to call it bottom hat. Okay, and just make sure it's assigned. So if you hit A twice to deselect everything, and you select that bottom hat group, and you click select, you can see that's what it is. So okay, that should be what you have. So now we need to click plus again, double click here, and let's call this top or whatever. So just call it top. And now we're going to select a vertex for the other part, hit Control L. So only this one here is selected, the hat part itself. Click on the top group and assign. So now if you double tap A to deselect everything, you click on top and you hit select, it's only going to select those there. So those are our 2 groups. We can now get started with our particle system. So let's tab out of edit mode. And with the hat here selected, we're going to go over to our particles settings here. So click on it, and we're going to click on the plus to create our first particle system. So it's just called particle settings, and we're going to make this hair. So click on hair, and what we want to do first of all is come over here and click on advanced as well. That's going to give us some more options in the bottom, which we'll get to in a second. So let's come over here under the emission. We're going to bring the hair length down. 4 meters is insane, and we're not working with real world measurements here anyway, but let's just go with something like 0.08 for now, or maybe even 0.11. We can mess around with it in a little while. At the moment, the problem is this first particle group is being distributed everywhere. So we need to actually come down here to our vertex groups at the bottom. That's why we had to enable advanced. And we're going to come here to density, and let's click on bottom hat, since this is the bottom hat part. Okay, so you can see now it's only in the pom-pom here and the bottom of the hat, just where we want it. And then we need to come here to the children drop down and make it interpolated. So now each one of those strands has a child particle. In this case, the display amount is 10. So each one of the original strands has 10 children that are its reference to that strand. And the final render amount is actually going to be 100. So it's going to be quite dense. In fact, let's just take the render amount here and just make it 80, which should be more than enough. And we're going to leave the display amount as 10. If your computer can handle it, I'd recommend bumping it up to 22. But you can leave it at 10 if you need to. Oh, that's just a neighborhood hoon that you heard there in the background. So where were we? So yeah, just set that to 22 if you can. So now we're going to come over here and give this some a little bit of roughness and random variation. Just looks too straight. So let's go over to the kink down here. Not the kink, the roughness. So go down to the roughness tab here, and I'm going to come down over here to the random, which is just over here. I'm going to drag that up, and that's going to make it a little bit more fuzzy, and that looks cool. And you can also mess around with the size of the strands just a little bit, the random variation there, and also try the threshold if you want, but just something like that is simple enough. So let's just quickly go up now to the render set tab, so drop down there, and just go to the path over here and just make this B-spline. Okay, so now once you've done that, we have this first group, this first hair system ready to go. So just those few settings is all you need to do. In fact, the only thing you could come in here and edit is the emission. If you go down to the emission, you can always adjust the length as needed. So I might even do 0.13, I think. So now we're going to click on plus again. And now we have a particle settings .001. So we're going to make this one hair as well. Click on advanced, come here to the hair length, and we're just going to drag that down until it is smaller than the original particle system. And let's make it 0.09. Let's go over to the render tab down here, make it B-spline. And let's also go over to the vertex group, go to the density, and let's give it that top hat. So now it's only being applied to this top part here. And let's go to the children's tab, make it interpolated. And then we want to go over under here in the children, once again to the roughness setting. So go to the roughness drop down, under the children, and then go down here to the bottom where you see the random option and just drag that random amount up, just to make it a little bit more fuzzy, like that. And you can also come over here back to the top where the children are, and let's make the render amount for this 80 as well. And if your computer can handle it, let's set the display amount to 22. So the display amount is essentially just what you're seeing in the viewport. So if I were to bump this up to 80 in the viewport, you can see that's more close to what the render is going to be, but that is a lot of, it's going to create a lot of lag in our scene here. So let's just leave that display amount at 22. It's very similar to how we have the viewport display levels on the Subdivision surface modifier versus the final render, if that makes sense, if you're new to Blender. So that's what that's all about. So back to the particle settings, I might just make the hair length for that second particle system under the emission just a little bit shorter. So just to create kind of like this fuzz. Okay, so now all of that is done. It doesn't look too cool yet because we don't have the materials, but we have our modeling out of the way now. We have a hat, we have our two particle systems. So now we can get into setting up our camera and our lights, and then we're going to go through our materials, each material one at a time. So the first we're going to add in is a light. So let's go Shift A. Let's go over to our light options and let's add in an area light. We're going to hit G in our front view, just move it over to the side here, and then R to rotate it in towards the subject here. Just like that, roughly 90 degrees. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then we're going to go S3 to scale it up 3 times, and hit enter. Then we're going to go over to our light settings. Now, by the way, just make sure obviously that you're in EV as we're working in EV. You can work in cycles if you want, and make sure to enable ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. If you're working with any emissive materials, you can also enable bloom to get that glow effect. If you're working with glass, make sure to also enable refraction. So let's go back to our light settings here with our light active. So go back to your light settings. Let's make the power 130 just to start. So let's hit Z and let's go rendered and see what that looks like. Okay, so I might bump mine up to 230. And this is also going to vary depending on the scale of your scene, but if you're following along with me, this should work fine. So in your top view, we're going to hit G to move it forward, and then R to rotate it in towards the subject. Then we're going to hit Shift D, bring it over to the side here, and then rotate it by hitting R towards the subject here like that. So now we have these two lights. If you select both of these lights and you hit S, Z, you can scale them up on the Z like that, just to make them a little bit more even. Now that looks good, but one more thing we can do is we can go Shift A, we can go to our light options, add in a point light, and we can come here to the radius, increase it to about 0.5, and increase the power to something like 50, then hit G, and just move it behind the character here, the gingerbread man, and just bring up that power bit by bit, and mess around with the radius. So this is going to give us a nice kind of rim lighting here. So if we mess around with the scale and the power here, we can see what it looks like. So I'm going to put one behind a hat here, Shift D, put one just behind the head here, and also Shift D, just one behind here, and one underneath the foot. This is going to give it some nice rim lighting here. In fact, if we get rid of this light here, you can see the rim lighting over there. So I'm going to actually just select this light here on the side, the area light, and make that 130. And I'm going to leave this one over here at 200. So just like that. And we can select these point lights at the back, and just move them around. You can see what that's kind of doing. If we duplicate them and we place them just behind the back of the gingerbread man here, it kind of creates that nice room lighting. Okay, and that's going to be more apparent once we get into our materials and we mess around with the reflectivity of the materials as well. So I'm going to go Shift D again, place one just behind here, bring up the power, duplicate one here, and then one under the feet, all at the back here, like that. Okay, so now we have our lighting set up. Let's get started with the materials. So we're going to go into our shading workspace. Once again, hit Z, go rendered, and let's select the eyes. Let's start with the eyes. So we're going to make the first kind of frosting. So let's select the eyes. We're going to go New. Let's call this Frosting 1. Okay, or you can call it Frosting White, because it's going to be white frosting. So call it Frosting White, and what we're going to do is we're going to come here and bring the roughness down to make it a little bit more reflective. Not all the way, but just something like 0.19 should be fine, or 0.2. But at the moment it looks too perfectly smooth. And what we need to do is add some distortion. But to see that a little bit better, let's just select the gingerbread man itself and click New. And let's just call that Gingerbread Man. So gingerbread man, I believe gingerbread is one word. And we're just going to come here to the base color and just temporarily, let's just make it a darker color, just so we can see the white stand out a little bit better, okay? So let's just select those eyes again and continue working on a frosting white material. So what we're going to use to displace this is a noise texture. We're going to go Shift A over here, search, and we're going to get a noise texture. Place the noise texture over here. And if you have Node Wrangler enabled, which I recommend you do, so go Edit, Preferences, under the add-ons here, just come to the search bar and type in Node Wrangler. So just Node Wrangler and then enable it. So once you've done that, if you select your noise texture and you hit Control T or Command T, it'll add in a mapping node and a texture coordinate. So we're going to just take the object here and plug it into the vector of the mapping node. And we're going to come here and make the scale 4. You can mess around with that later. But then we need to go Shift A, search, and get a color ramp node. And we're going to take the factor, plug it into the vector of the color ramp. Then we're going to take the color here and plug it into the normal. But we need a conversion node for that to work. So let's go Shift A, search, type in bump, and now select your bump node. Now we can take the color output of the color ramp here, plug it into the height, and take the normal and plug it into the normal of the principled shader down here. And now we should start to see that kind of displacement. You can see over here it's way too rough. So we're going to come here to the strength and make it 0.2. And now we can see it looks a lot better. And you can actually see this is what the color ramp looks like. It's using these two values here. So any dark values or lighter values are being used to determine how the normals are being displayed. Okay, so I'm not really too familiar with the science behind it, but it's just using these grayscale values to displace on the texture. Okay, so let's just continue working. So you can mess around with the scale here as much as you want. If you make it too fine, it doesn't make sense. So I recommend anything between 2 and 5 should be okay. Okay, so now let's grab this mouth here, come to the drop down and give it that same frosting white material. And it looks a lot better as well. Now we need to make another frosting material. So what we're going to do to save time is with our white frosting material, we're going to select all of these nodes, right click and go copy. Then we're going to select the bow tie here, go new, and this is called this frosting red. And then we're going to select these two nodes here, hit X and delete, right click and then paste. Now all we simply have to do is come here to the base color and make it red. Like that. And let's just bring the roughness up a little bit on that. Now we can select these two buttons here and give them that same material. Cool. So mess around with that roughness till it kind of makes sense to you. And with the white frosting here, we can make a little bit of an off-white, just a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty cool already. So now we have to actually make the gingerbread man material. So if you just go to Google and you type in gingerbread man texture, you can see some different textures pop up here. Some of them seem to be free if you sign into an account, Some of them are on sites where you might have to pay for them, so just have a look. I actually found a gingerbread man texture, and I kind of just edited a little bit in GIMP to make it seamless. So just go ahead, maybe one like this, just download it and then put it on your desktop, so whichever one you find. And then we're going to use that texture on our gingerbread man. In fact, you could even take something like take a picture of a bread crust, so a loaf of bread, and just drag that image onto your computer and just kind of use that. It should work just fine. So once you found a texture, just go ahead, save it onto your desktop. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select our gingerbread man. And we're going to go, we already added this gingerbread man material, but we're going to select this principled shader, and because we have Node Wrangler enabled, if we go Control T, it's going to automatically add in an image texture, a mapping node, and a texture coordinate. So let's just move these guys over, and then we're going to click on Open. Where did I put it? Tutorial started. Okay, here we go. So it's just a bread texture. So I'm going to open that image. So if I come here to the drop down, you can see it's just this one right here. And at the moment you're not seeing anything, because what we need to do is actually go to our UV editing here, and then go to front orthographic view in this window over here, hit A to select all of the geometry. Then if you go U, and so you hit U and you go project from view, it'll project it. Then we can just come over here, select all of these vertices, hit S to scale it up, and now we can go over here in this window, hit Z and then go rendered, and then see what it looks like. So you can rotate it around, scale it up. So just go ahead, whatever image you find, just try and make it seamless in a software like GIMP or something. It's a lot of tutorials out there, so I'm not going to be covering it, but the more seamless it is, the better you can scale it up, and you won't see kind of any seam lines. So that's looking really good. So once you're happy with that, we're going to go back to our shading workspace, and we're just going to add some more nodes in here to make this look a little bit better. So what it needs is some bump. So what we're going to simply do with this gingerbread man material, we're going to just grab these three nodes, hit G to move them over a bit. Then we're going to go Shift A, search. We're going to get a color ramp node, grab that, and then we're going to take the color and plug it into the factor here. Now the reason we are doing this with a color ramp is because we want a grayscale to plug into a bump node. So let's go Shift A, search, get a bump node. Place the bump node down here, then take the color output here, plug it into the height. Okay, so grab it, that one, plug it in there. Take the normal and plug it into the normal of the principled shader. Then we're going to come here to the strength and make it 0.2, just like that. Now you can also come here and mess around with the roughness. Don't make it too reflective, so just maybe something like 0.3 or maybe 0.3.5 should be fine. So there we have the gingerbread man material. Now all we have to do is work with the hat, which is super simple. So let's select the hat, and let's just go into edit mode with that one. Then let's go to our materials tab. We're going to click new, and let's just call this hat bottom. And by default it'll be assigned to everything because it's the first material. And then we're going to click on the plus again, and let's go new, and let's just call this hat top. So with this hat top material selected, we're going to select a vertex on the top part of a hat. Hit Control L to select all of this geometry, and then with that hat top material selected, we're going to hit Assign, and then we're going to come over here to our top hat material, and while we're still in our rendered mode here, we're just going to come to the base color and make it red. Make the roughness a little bit higher. We don't want it to be too reflective, so just make it like a nice kind of Christmas red, not too saturated. Then we're going to tab out of edit mode. And at the moment, we're not seeing those materials applied to the particle system. So what we need to do is we need to actually go to our part with that hat selected, go to our particle settings. Let's just go to the first particle system, which is our bottom part of a hat. Let's go over to our render drop down, and let's go to the material here, and we want to make sure that is hat bottom. Then we want to select the second particle system, .001. We want to go down under the render tab, and let's make that hat top. And now we should see this. So now it's using the materials underneath it. And that's pretty much our gingerbread man. So let's add in a camera and give this guy a test render. So I'm going to go back to my layout. Then I'm going to go Shift A, add in a camera. And you guys already know how to move a camera around. Just hit G or whatever. Just place it around in your scene and then hit 0 to go to your camera view. So I'm just going to make something like this. Totally up to you. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just set the camera where you want it. And what I'm going to do with my camera though is I'm going to go to my output settings, and I'm just going to make the Y resolution 900, and I'm going to make, okay, so maybe make it 1200, and then make the X resolution 900. So just something like that, just to change the aspect ratio, zoom it in a little bit. And you can also go to your camera settings here and mess around with the focal length. So I might make mine 95 and just zoom back a little bit. Totally up to you. This is not really a camera placement tutorial. So once you have a camera set up, once again, you can select these point lights at the back, and you can just hit Shift D to duplicate them and place them around till the lighting kind of feels right to you. This is kind of a really cool little technique I learned from a Blender Guru video a few years ago. Was using point lights to create rim lighting. So very effective little technique. So doesn't matter how messy it looks. I mean, this is just not going to be an animation. This is just a final render we're trying to make here. So just seeing what that looks like. So you can see here the nice rim lighting that I'm talking about. If I got rid of these lights at the back here, if I grabbed them and I hit them, you can see it kind of doesn't look as good. Once I place them in there, you can see it kind of makes it stand out from the background. So it's really kind of a nice look. So once we have that all set up, just go ahead, always make sure to save your work before you render, especially when you're working with particles. Then we're going to go render, and we're just going to hit render image, and let's see what this looks like. And there we have it. So I can see here one thing I'm not happy with is how this is coming out, the red frosting. So I'm just going to work on that quickly. I'm going to go into the shading workspace, Z, just go rendered, select that bow tie here, and let's see what's going on here. So we might have to just bring that strength down just a bit and bring up the scale maybe a little bit, and just mess around with these sliders. I think they're a little bit too close, so maybe just something like that. Maybe mess around with the strength. This is one of those things you have to kind of fiddle with till you get something that you like. Also the roughness of the frosting, depending on how long the frosting has been out, it can kind of start to dry a little bit. So fresher frosting is going to be a little bit more reflective. Drier frosting is going to have less roughness to it. So mess around with it, just make it work with whatever you're working with. And by the way, these color choices here are something you can choose for yourself. I just kind of went with the white and the red. It just kind of made sense to me. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. I will be making this blend file here available on my Patreon, so you guys who are on Patreon can check that out. And it also really supports your channel and helps me spend more time to make these little tutorials for the Blender community. So those of you on Patreon, I really do appreciate all of that support. So I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe.